I think if you're doing generic thought leadership papers, unless you're really precise, you're just sort of chucking it out into the wind, really.
Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Do More with Less. We talk to the world's top marketing leaders and thinkers to understand and share how individuals and teams are best responding to the blunt instruction to do more with less. Now, world's top marketing leaders, today I'm talking to Pete Markey, former Chief Marketing Officer of Boots, where he drove a record 17 quarters of consecutive market share growth, TSB Bank, the Post Office, global insurer RSA, and also senior positions for Aviva, More Than, and the AA. What you'll notice here is these are all some of the UK's biggest and most heritage and loved brands. Pete is one of the, annoyingly to me, Pete's one of the most humble and normal guys you'll ever hear from. If you don't know Pete, you'll hear that in a second. But he's actually one of the most acclaimed UK marketing leaders we've ever had. He's been Marketer of the Year 5 times. He's always in the running for Marketer of the Year awards. I think he was named Marketer of the Year for Marketing Week in 2023. He's a consistent presence in Campaign's Power 100. Industry recognition, marketing recognition. He's all over the place in terms of awards. This guy was literally named the best CMO in Britain as recently as January 2023. Pete, when I talk to you, you don't come across to me like literally the best CMO in Britain. You come across as just an amazing person. How does all that make you feel?
Well, look, first of all, it's lovely to be on, Mark. And I just feel really blessed that I've just been able to work for some amazing brands. I've got to work with some amazing people. And I think it's just good to keep your feet on the ground. I always feel I've got more to do, more to learn, more to push for, more people to help, more businesses to support with growth. So I guess I never take time to stop and pause and reflect. I'm always on to the next thing of like, well, there's more to do here.
Listen, I'm really pleased to have you here. Now, Do More with Less is one of the fastest growing B2B marketing podcasts, and you're the first consumer marketer, the first B2C marketing leader we've ever had on the podcast. I wanted to have a conversation with a consumer marketer that's worked across countless different sectors. And I wanted to ask, for us B2B marketers targeting CMOs at consumer businesses, are we getting it right?
I think it's a really mixed bag, Mark, to be honest. And a lot of it depends on how relevant and personal the communication is. And I had a lot of this, particularly when I was at Boots, where people would think they knew our brand and would come and mainly send emails, but we'd get the occasional cold call. And most of it misfired because they just hadn't done their homework on the brand. They hadn't understood our brand enough and what we were about. They had created assumptions about the brand. And actually, it just wasn't relevant. And even those that started to get maybe a seed of an interest, I thought, great, I'll jump on a call. It was all very like one-dimensional sales pitch, like we've got this tool to sell and that's all we've got. And I think as contrast to that, the best approaches are ones that people really understood genuinely what was going on in our business and had a perspective or thought leadership or something to offer that would drive it forward. So it's funny, isn't it? Because it's classic marketing, isn't it? Right message, right time, right person. But often I feel in some of the B2B prospecting that can get missed for the sake of pushing volume and a sort of a let's throw everything out there and see what sticks. And certainly a lot of the emails I got have been pretty bad. The other bit, I think, probably is a slightly comical story, but I've had all sorts of stuff through LinkedIn about agencies wanting to meet, and usually people will have listened to something like this, a podcast I've done, or something I've written about. And I remember once someone had heard a podcast I'd done where I talked about my mum, and literally they wrote to me on LinkedIn going, I heard this podcast recently, we talked about your mum. Yeah, my mum's great too. Our mum's brilliant. Mum, I'd like to talk to you about the ABC CRM platform. It's like the worst way, it's like literally the connection was, we've both got mums. Yeah. And I'm just thinking, it's not quite the way into this, really. Yeah. So I've had the good, the bad, and the ugly throughout that. But the more tailored, the more personal you can make it, that's how you really cut through to someone like me.
Hello, sorry to interrupt. Do More With Less is a podcast and a webinar and a set of events that's made possible entirely by marketing resource group Orbital X. If you would like to know how we credibly claim many millions of pounds worth of pipeline influenced by our marketing resource group support and up to 60% of your closed won deals, give us a call, half an hour with one of us. Really happy to talk to you and explain how that works and how it might look for your business. Thank you for allowing this interruption. Back to the podcast. Do you feel like my audience is spending huge amounts of their week putting together materials right now for people just like you? What would stop us wasting our time? What do we need to do differently?
I think thought leadership is not necessarily a bad thing, but you're right. If it's just too much of a broadcast message, literally to the nation, a thought leadership thing on a certain topic, I just think, again, the more relevant you can make it, the better. So take the Boots example, something about the future of loyalty. Actually, this morning I was at an event with an agency and it was a really good topic. It was about authenticity in the age of AI. And suddenly you go, well, that's an interesting topic for interesting people with an interesting agency. I'd like to go to that. So I think there are themes and topics so for me in Boots, it was about loyalty. It was about how to, grow, store footfall whilst also holding on to digital share. It was about how AI, and this is for everyone, isn't it? What AI is doing and the role AI should play. We all need to know about that. It's probably a slightly overworn topic, but events and thought leadership around those things really appealed. Again, the more they could be tailored onto, we know you're grappling with these things, the better it is. So I think that those aren't wasted, but I think if you're doing generic thought leadership papers, unless you're really precise, you're just sort of chucking it out into the wind, really, and the sort of hoping something sticks. And come back to AI again, there's so many papers on AI, no one's quite got all the answers, and yet there's all these thought leadership white papers coming out, and I just think therefore it's hard to stand out, and it's just yet another paper. Whereas something that brings a particularly special perspective around, how to transform your marketing team using AI, for example, you go, well, that's interesting, rather than just AI today or something. So I think the more precise you can make it, the better and more interesting it is, but also scour the market. How different is what you're offering and talk about really from what other people are providing to make you really stand out?
Morella, who is my colleague who is currently producing this podcast for us, is a queen copywriter. She is an absolute talent, as is her partner in crime, Bianca. And since joining Orbital X, we've run copywriting clinics. And one of the things we always talk about is that specifics beat vague every single time. That if you put out an event invite that promises latest insights and big thoughts, and actually, rather than promise big thoughts and big insights, tell me exactly tell me what they are. Tell me what I'm going to learn. It's crazy that we're still doing that. Tell me this, though. You mentioned when we spoke last that, you gave an example at Boots that were some horror emails and meetings that you took where people claimed to understand the Boots loyalty advantage card, but just didn't. It was clear to you that they'd put advantage card Boots into Google before the meeting and just hadn't bothered really doing their research. Two questions, really. One is that offends me. That offends me that we're going to take somebody's time. Did you find that annoying when that happened? And secondly, one of the things that really stuck out to me, which I think my audience would jump on as a kind of insight, is you said there was one meeting in particular that slipped past your PA. So do CMOs like you train and upskill and lead your PAs to understand what meetings you'll take and what meetings so are your PAs, how big a barrier are your PAs to get past when we're trying to reach you?
In that instance, it was more slip past the length of time that we'd allowed the meeting to be on for. So I'd agreed to take the meeting quite happily myself directly. And so the way I've always managed my diary is I wouldn't, as brilliant as my PAs have been, I wouldn't expect them to be like a gatekeeper filter for that, because I want to read those emails. But what had slipped past you is they managed to book 2 hours of mine and someone else's time. And you're like, for an initial meeting for what this agency were bringing, you could do that in 30 or 40 minutes. That's the other bit I'd argue, is be precise and be respectful of people's time. don't demand a really long period unless you can fill it. You'd be far more memorable to grab half an hour with the CMO, leave them wanting more, than sweat it for 2 hours and flog the thing to death. And I think the example I gave you, Mark, this one was, we're giving them 2 hours, and within 40 minutes I was bored because they were just going over stuff we'd already done. There was nothing fresh or new. And then to your question, it is frustrating because you think this is a waste of my time and your time. And I'm trying to be incredibly polite, but we've already thought of all this stuff. But I think that if there's enough of a hook to get a meeting with someone like me, I think you're quite within your rights to ask some questions. We want to come and talk to you about the future of loyalty. We've done all this insight. Can we just check in with you on a couple of questions? Because we really want to make sure that what we bring is of value. That's really good respect for my time, because then I'll answer those questions, because equally I want it to be a good meeting too, even though I'm just getting to know you. So don't feel you have to leave it alone at that. You're quite within your rights to ask some questions and make it a better meeting. Once your, excuse the phrase, foot is in the door, you're quite happy to do that. But no, the way PAs I've worked with are brilliant. They mainly trained on managing my time really tightly. What I would do though, and you and I have touched on this before, Mark, as well, is I would use a team to bounce things past. So often people go to the top, they go to the CMO. And if someone wanted to introduce a new CRM system, well, I've got someone running CRM and loyalty. What I'm not going to do is book time myself, go, well, this is interesting. I'd always send it to the person running that, the team, and say, this looks interesting. What do you think? And then we discuss it. So they would act as a bit of a gatekeeper for me, because otherwise I think it's disrespectful to them. And what the worst thing is for me to take a meeting and then say to the person who works for me, you've now got to meet these people as well. I'd rather do it all together. Otherwise, a waste of everyone's time. But I found this a couple of times with vendors, particularly on retail media that we did a lot of in Boots, where I'd look at it and go, oh, that's really interesting, go to the team, and they go, actually, we've already got that covered, Pete, with these 3 providers. And I just wasn't in the detail I needed for that. So it's very helpful to have it. So it's more the team acted as a filter. But just be clear, the team were never sort of not invented here. We don't want to do that. It was more just either we've got it covered or it's worth a call, but we need to ask these questions about it. So it's very helpful.
I think that's a really good point. I think when I first started in B2B marketing, Pete, I felt like everywhere I turned, every single vendor of any nature and any product seemed to believe that they had a CMO story. And it became very clear very quickly, we don't all have a CMO story. We not everybody merits being in front of the CMO. I think what we've got better at, certainly at Orbital X, but I think across B2B marketing, is really understanding our ICP, and hopefully that should have a benefit. But do you feel that you could give us a sense of how, like an insider view of how closely CMOs get to that B2B technology buying process?
I think a good CMO worth their weight in gold should be involved from the start and identifying the need for the business. There should be a business imperative. So I've put the Adobe Marketing Cloud into 3 different organizations, Aviva, TSB, and Boots. And for each, we started with a challenge for the business. Aviva was about integrating multiple databases following acquisitions. TSB was about modernizing our approach to marketing. At Boots, it was speed in retail. You need to get out our communications better, sharper, smarter. And so the foundations went from there. We built a business case around it. And then I took that into those businesses to get sign off for that work to get done and then to get implemented on the back of it. So I've been very involved. But your point's the right one, because to do that, the IT team are massively important. I need their sponsorship and support, but I also need the business to sign off on the investment in the first place to agree to do it with a clear business case that I know I'm going to get measured against. So you need to, and actually when I look at Boots, every month we sat with the most senior stakeholders in the business. And I had to report on every line item of the benefits of the business case. So there's no getting off the hook, nor there should be. But I knew that in effect, I had to put my money where my mouth was and go, right, you target me against this, bonus me against it, because I believe in it so much, as do the team. So I think as a CMO, you've got to be involved, because otherwise you might just get given technology you don't want or need. But also, I think if your fingers on the pulse with what customers need and where the market is and where the market dynamics are, you should have a good view of what technology you need. So I think that extends into CRM, which you talked about, but thinking about the multiple AI creative platforms you got now, actually, as a CMO, you should have a perspective on what does your team need? What agency setup do you need? How do you want to transform your marketing team? Therefore, what tech do you need? So I think you should be very involved. That's a great example, AI, where if you're not driving it, and let's say it gets driven out of IT, you might end up with sort of weird thing you don't actually want or need, and change that's forced on you. So, to shape your own destiny, get involved in making it. Don't have it handed to you. You've got to be involved like that in the decision making. And where companies or agencies can be really helpful for the CMO is help with the business case. And actually interesting with the Adobe one with TSB, I worked with an agency called Manifesto for Growth. I actually brought them in specifically to write the business case. So they helped develop all the thinking and the numbers working with our finance team. When it then came to the exec team, it was already endorsed, supported by finance. We kicked the tires, reviewed on it, and that agency helped me do that. So I think agencies play a massive role in helping get this stuff over the line with the depth and rigor of thinking behind it too. So that can be invaluable. And then that's the journey we went on.
Have you ever been in a situation, Pete, where you have invested time in a business case for buying a piece of tech or some kit? You believed in it wholeheartedly, but it just simply didn't work out. And when you were held to, let's say, a monthly or quarterly meeting in whichever business you were in to progress the kind of story of how it was benefiting the business, the numbers didn't just stack up.
Yeah, I mean, so far, I haven't had a business case that not hit the numbers, but on the Boots one was squeaky because the numbers are really ambitious. And actually the way we changed that, and credit to Holly, who I mentioned earlier on, who came in to run that for me, she transformed how that team operated. And often those sorts of implementations fail because the team doesn't change. The kit arrives and people look at each other and go, oh, nothing's different. And funnily enough, then nothing is different. But if you change how the team operates and runs, then funnily enough, the results then follow. I have had situations there where I've tried to work with agencies that I haven't then been able to. And the reasons have tended to be a mix of bad timing in the business because there's something about to happen, restructuring, changes, market conditions, or there's just not an appetite. Actually in Boots, I wanted to move one agency relationship and just wasn't allowed to do it because there wasn't a willingness in the business to break up or break into a bigger agency relationship to take that bit of work out. And we got very advanced with that. And we hit a call with one stakeholder and we just don't want to make that decision because we want to run it through one network. And look, that was a real tough blow for us involved with that. But you go, I'm not going to die on this hill. We have to move on. It's frustrating, but there'll be other battles to win. And I still don't regret the work we did on that because we learned a lot in terms of what we actually did want then from our agency partner. So yeah, that's the only example I can think of. But I do think a lot of this becomes easier if you can read the room as a CMO, around when you're pitching to get investment, as I mentioned with TSB, you should have all the stakeholders sign up already. Those bits should be ironed out already. You should know the budget's there. You should know the business wants it, that's bought into the strategy, wants to do it, is making a clear choice before you get too far along with it and go, oh, darn, we got all these other things. And there should be enough opportunity for people to flag those things at early doors. So having a great project manager, great engagement with IT director, finance, all those bits throughout, well, that sounds obvious.
Tell me about heading back to B2B again. I wonder whether you think that similar experiences in consumer marketing are occurring. Orbital X has a specialism in which we can offer 15 or 16 marketing skill sets for the price of one because we specialize in bringing quality pipeline to those with a meager resource, right? And I just wonder how much resource you guys have got to buy 4 or 5 things when really the marketing buying cycle is complex and full, and you're not really doing marketing if you're only doing a number of these silos. You have to be doing the end-to-end. What's AI done to your budgets and your appetite for dealing with multiple partners as opposed to fewer?
I think ideally you want to have fewer anyway, because you say if you're stretched for resource too thinly, you just can't get across all the agencies. And also you rely so heavily on the agencies to talk to and communicate with each other. And that's a lot to ask sometimes. If you've got 5 or 6 agencies, I mean, for me, the perfect rhythm is at least 2 or 3, no more. And then you can run that properly, regardless of size of your team. I'm seeing all sorts of stuff with AI. I mean, where we were progressing the most at Boots was on creative development through things like our internal studio, where we were just getting much more efficient and faster at what we could do, both through our own setup and through Oliver's technology that we had as well. And WPP Open, really good platforms to accelerate what we're doing. But I left the business actually thoughtful about where all that goes, because actually, once you've got the engine room of creative development running day to day, you do likely need either less people or a different mix of people to run that, to orchestrate it. It's a different skill set than the project management sort of campaign execution of old. So I think CMOs should be thinking about the setup of their teams, the technology they need, and then how agencies fit within that, whether the agencies are delivering the platform, AI platform for you or not, or whether you're doing more of it yourselves, and then right sizing around that, regardless of size of business. And your question is a good one. At the minute, I think you're going to see these Frankenstein's monster setups of people buying bits and bits being plugged in and not really realizing what they've got. There's a definite foot on the ball moment for CMOs right now to stop and go, golly, what do we really need here? And I actually think that the B2B businesses that do well at the moment will be those that can come and work with a CMO and help on the transformation. That's the thing you haven't got time for. You don't have time to think about it. The CFO is throwing down on new articles from the FT they've read about all sorts of other businesses, Unilever, Coke, cutting costs and whatever, and rolling out AI. You've got that pressure. You've got budget pressure coming up. The environment's tough. The economy's hard, particularly in the UK. So you need an answer. So someone who could come alongside you and be like, well, we'll help you map out, the transformation journey, what people you need, what skills you need, what technology plugs in here, what agencies. I think there's an opportunity there. So yeah, proper foot on the ball, have a think, what do you need moment feels right now. And I do think there's an opportunity for B2B agencies who provide that transformation service.
Now, you've had that storied career I tried to describe and articulate at the top of the podcast, but you've actually spent, I think for the first time in your career, if I'm right, the first year ever, where you've been agency side, consultancy side, out of the maelstrom, and I suspect it won't be long before you head back in. Where do you think that you will be looking at, with everything that you've done over the last year, in terms of pitching to businesses like yours, working with agency side and understanding how to both scale agencies, but how also to be a good client, and also the sort of balance between people and technology you've just spoken of?
I think I would, and I think I've learned so much in this past sort of period of time working for an agency, and also, as you know, I've done bits of work for small entrepreneurs, setting up businesses with celebrities, and that's been a very small, hands-on sort of setup too. So first of all, got a much better appreciation for agencies and the power of what they bring, but also how as clients, the way we act helps build the relationship well. And if you get a good client, good agency, it's amazing. But I do feel very thoughtful at the moment on wherever I end up next, just making sure marketing is on the strongest, best possible footing to succeed and weather any future events or storms. And by that, I mean, how are we using tech? How are we using agencies? What skills are we cultivating? And importantly, what of this beautiful, amazing craft of marketing do we want to hold on to that we don't want technology to replace? What's the thing? Is it great strategic thought? I was at an event this morning. I used the example of a campaign I did at called More Than Freeman, where we used an impersonator of Morgan Freeman. And I don't think AI can generate that. AI couldn't generate the meerkats, for example, iconic sort of work. I don't think it could do a good John Lewis Christmas ad. Therefore, there's things and crafts that I think we want to hold on to. So I think my future roles will be very thoughtful about cultivating for this generation and future generations the craft, what the bits in the craft of marketing to fight for and protect, whilst also embracing where technology can be a support and companion to what we do. But I would think quite differently about structures, organization, agencies as a result of that. And it excites me. It really energizes me around future-proofing work and teams and organizations like that.
So do you think you'll have a smaller team and be figuring out how to use tech differently?
I guess depends on the business, but I think generally marketing teams will be, let me say, more focused. I don't know whether less smaller, but I think they'll be more focused on where the value-added areas are. And I think the skills required and what people are being asked to do will be different. I could certainly see more work orchestrated by marketers themselves using AI to do creative versioning and less need for internal studios and things like that, or different roles for internal studios. So I think you'll see a lot of roles being mashed up together. In Boots, I had media and creative separately. Actually, those worlds are coming so closely together. I think it's hard to keep them apart now. So yeah, it's a world of change, but it's exciting.
And tell me, last question to you then. If you could tell your B2B emailers anything, about how you want to be engaged in the next job. Talk to me about that. So, for example, sometimes I think the obvious answer potentially is something you've already mentioned, which is learn about my bloody business, learn about my needs, actually come to it with something new. So a bit of personalization. But I also wonder whether there's a strength that we lack currently as B2B pitchers and sellers. Maybe we don't understand the relationships you have and need to culture with your CFO and with other functions, or maybe we need to be a little bit more business minded about what it's like to work in a kind of a matrix organization, and we're just interested in our little creative bit or our little advert or our little, hey, look at our social tiles, while you're thinking, what kind of things might you tell my audience they could do better if they needed to get to you in future?
I mean, you're right. The personalization is really important, but I think it's personalization on a couple of levels. Is also hopefully on me and others out there's enough to get to know me as a person a bit as well, and then equally with the business, really take time to understand it. I like your thought on also understand who else is involved in the business. So don't come in assuming that you can get the deal signed just through me. I remember when I was at post office trying to do a deal with one company, and they literally arrived for a meeting with the contract for me to sign. And I'm like, the world doesn't work that way. It's got all these other people that need to sign it first. And also we've got to check the terms and conditions. I can't just sign it. So I think it's a bit of work out the mechanics of it, also work out what role you can play, support it. But really understand people, and also I'd say don't for me particularly, you don't have to flatter me. So I don't don't have to say you've listened to a podcast, or it's fine. Just say, look, we know you care about these things in the industry. We're passionate about them too. We've got this thing, and we've really thought about the business you're in with it. And I go, well, that's interesting. You're talking about the passion points, the things I care about. That's interesting. That's a motivation for a conversation. That's really understanding me. Yeah, and then I think then it opens the door to all sorts of wonderful conversations.
Pete, thank you as ever for your time. It's been a great pleasure to see you again, and enjoy being in these new situations in kind of Leeds and Manchester, selling to big organisations as an agency. And I mean, I know you've worked with celebs before because of all the different advertising campaigns you've run, but it's really lovely seeing you out doing something different this year.
Amazing. Thank you. Look, thanks for having me on, Mark. It's been a great conversation. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Yeah, bye.